Things Musicians Don't Talk About is supported by the Royal Society of Musicians. Since 1738, they have been providing vital financial assistance, advice and guidance to music professionals unable to work due to accident, illness, stress or anxiety. Whether you're working as a performer, administrator, technician or teacher, and everything in between, they're there to help. If you know of someone in need, you can contact them in confidence by visiting their website, which is www.rsmgb.org, or you can contact them by ringing 020 7629 6137. Support their work by becoming a member or donating today.
Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. This is very exciting to be joined by Eleanor Turner and Thangam Debbonaire to talk about politics as a sort of general topic. But it's what we're really keen to discuss is the musician as a political person, which obviously potentially we're on different levels of confidence about, understanding about where we fit in and what we're allowed to do, how we're allowed to represent ourselves. So we thought it would be really interesting to talk to two people who very much have thought about politics in their lives, both as a human being and as a musician. So to start with, I'm just going to say a bit about Thangam Debbonaire, who, as I'm sure many of you will know, is herself a fantastic cellist and consultant to the arts and culture organisations. She was an MP for Bristol between 2015 and 2024 and has recently been named the first CEO of the newly formed UK Opera Association. Thangam actually gave her first professional cello performance in a Swedish prison when she was 10 years old. And since then, she's performed professionally, mostly for theatre, and latterly as a founder member of the Parliamentary String Quartet.
And Eleanor Turner, who I realised that I actually met in about 2012 when she came to give a masterclass at my school. But Eleanor's musical work is about creating intriguing and meaningful live experiences, as well as contributing to other artist projects. Her Western classical technique informs but does not inhibit her choices as she carves a unique path through her life and career. Eleanor has enjoyed a 10-year partnership with tabla player Mendy Singh. Their duo Tala Tarang was supported in 2022 by a Develop Your Creative Practice Award from ACE, enabling them to reconnect and compose together in the aftermath of COVID. Eleanor is a passionate advocate for new music, having won second prize in the Gaudeamus Interpreters Contest 2011, and this month, perhaps last month, I don't know. This month, she's launching a commissioning fund with her harp book Lullabies for the Land, co-created with Scottish Palestinian artist Dima Noara. Yeah. Eleanor sets lullabies from indigenous nations and the Swana region alongside lesser-known European lullabies to oppose cultural erasure while supporting Palestinian children's charities. So in order to get to know you both a little bit more than your biographies, I've chosen 5 quick-fire questions from Vogue's 73 questions, because they asked their celebrities these questions and you are our celebrities today. So, Eleanor, what is your favourite time of day?
Morning.
Thangam, what are 3 things you can't live without?
My fountain pen, a huge amount of notebooks, and my cello.
Very good. Eleanor, a book that everyone should read?
That's a really tricky one because I can never find the answer quickly. So I'm just going to say my one on the go at the moment, which is Your Life in Theatre by a friend of mine called Chris Grady, who's a producer, and he also teaches production and is just an amazing advocate for living an authentic life as an artist.
Beautiful, thank you. Thangam, what is the best way to take a rest or decompress?
I'm not a world expert in this, but I do yoga. And actually what I mostly do is go and see my family in India. But what is the best way? Get out into the open air.
Oh, yeah. And for both of you, if you could switch lives with somebody for a day, who would it be?
Oh, well, I was saying to a student this morning that I'd love to go back to experience music before Western classical music. So, I can't think of a person that I would like to be, but I'd love to, travel back in time before the octave was split into 12 equal semitones.
Good answer.
Really good.
Oh, I haven't been using my mic. I'm so sorry. I've done it wrong already.
We'll get you to re-record those
Okay,
later.
we'll have to re-record everything.
It's fine.
Nobody will.
We can boost it.
Yeah, we could do something. And if you could switch lives with somebody for a day.
Well, do you know, controversially, I'm pretty happy with my life, so I don't actually want to switch. But if I have to, I'd quite like to switch with Angelica Kaufman, who was a professional painter at a time when people think there weren't any women professional painters. She was one of the founders of the Royal Academy of Arts. And if you go into the RA, the Piccadilly entrance, and you look up, there are 4 Angelica Kaufman ceiling paintings, which I go and visit regularly.
Wow.
And they are about the arts, actually. I mean, it's art about art, but she's absolutely wonderful.
Beautiful. Thank you. I feel like I know you both much better now.
I know me both. I know me better.
So that's a good result.
Yes. Still not doing the mic properly.
You're fine. You're doing fine. You're doing great. So, Thangam, obviously you have a long history in politics. I'm really interested, when did you start music? When did you start politics? And where do they join in your life? Or do they not join?
Oh, they very much join. So when did I start music? My parents were both pianists. My dad came from India to this country on the boat in 1958. He was 18. He had his 19th birthday in the Suez Canal all alone. His parents sold pretty much everything they had to pay for him to get here and take up his place at the Royal Academy of Music, where he studied piano and met my mom. So there isn't a time when there wasn't music. And I started learning the cello when I was 4. And so 55 years ago, I'm not teaching my mum. My mum, despite me, is actually making extraordinary progress on the cello. She's in her 80s and she regularly says to me, why can't I play like you? And I say, I've been doing this 55 years, woman. Do you not remember? You used to drive me to my cello lessons at all sorts of hours of the day. And politics, again, similarly, I do not remember a time in my life that wasn't political, because my mum, although she was a pianist, she came from a very, very political family. Her dad was on the assembly line at the Cowley Works in Oxford, and her mum was a nurse, and they were both very, very active in their trade union and the Cooperative Party and the Labour Party, and my granddad was eventually a Labour councillor in Oxford, and he was invited to stand for Parliament and said, I can't, I'm a working class man and I can't take that long off work. But my grandmother would have made the better politician, in my view. I did not have a plan to go into politics, but I joined the Labour Party when I was 18, just like everybody else in my family. It represents my values. And where does it join now? Well, because I understand both arts and culture worlds and politics, it means I actually do operate at the overlap. And one of my driving missions for the remaining years of my life is to try and find ways to help arts and culture to be more political, and not just say we're lovely, you should love us, which, by the way, I agree with. I mean, arts and culture are lovely and everyone should love us, but that's not gone too well. And with the lack of an industry body for the performing arts in particular, in the run up to a budget, every other industrial sector will have had a sort of trade body negotiating on its behalf with the Chancellor. They may or may not get what they want, but we lack that. And I think one of the reasons we lack it is because we have traditionally and understandably just hoped that people understood how good we are and how important we are. And that's not, in my view, working that well at the moment. So they join, but also that, politically speaking, I think most politicians might say, oh, I don't do arts and culture. They might. But they all sing in the shower. They read something. They might not read poetry. They might not read books. Everybody notices when they come into a room like this. You couldn't help but notice the art, even if you don't know anything about it. So everybody has arts and culture in their lives. People watch telly. That is culture. You don't get a good TV drama without having great costume designers, makeup artists, hair, lighting technicians. You know, you need the full range of cultural professions. So one of the things that I try and do with my colleagues is help them to see that actually whether or not they identify to such, culture is in their lives and therefore is important.
Yeah.
And good. Eleanor, actually before, just a quick note that actually about 15 minutes before the end, we will open up the floor for questions. So do keep thinking very, very hard about your questions throughout the talk. Eleanor, your life seems infused with politics and being passionate about societal issues. When did that start? Was there a beginning point? Can you tell us about how that?
Yeah, I think that there was two kind of beginnings. My mother was very good at campaigning for local causes. So I was always very proud when I saw her picture on the front page of the Stamford Mercury, looking fierce as hell. Really powerful. She would get behind anything, whether it was the post office closing or, just like any local groups. And she would be the person that would happily represent and be standing at the front with a big banner. So that was really inspiring. And I think that showed me that it was a great thing to do and that pride that I felt in her. And then I suppose the other main change would be when I had my son when I was age 20, when I sort of unknowingly became part of politics as a young single mother, and all the judgments that come with that. And I suppose I kind of entered politics in that way, realising that I was, one of the things that people discussed in political issues. And then it's just become more and more important in my life when I've realised that I can use my privilege and my voice to represent other people who maybe don't have a voice. It's kind of just sort of seeped its way in through those beginnings of being proud of my wonderful mum.
Such a beautiful way for both of you to sort of develop an interest in politics through families. Eleanor, I mean, as a freelance musician myself, I often am aware of the risks of speaking out and its effect on my ability to get work or retain work. Yeah. Have you felt that risk, and have there been times where you have been penalised for speaking out?
Yeah, not knowingly, but I did notice that when I've been more vocal in particular about Palestine over the past 2 years, I have noticed that there has been a slightly less work coming my way, but you couldn't say it was specifically because of that. But I think that obviously with the algorithm kind of shutting off, against reposting political things, the algorithm seems to just want us to take selfies and, celebrate the birth of a baby and things like that. That seems to go down really well with Meta, and that you will get penalised. So less people will see your musical work as a result of you posting political opinion. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, Thangam, I can imagine you must have now a complicated relationship to activism and maybe what that means following your experience in the last election, losing your seat. I'm really curious, both emotionally, how that experience was, what it looked like. And also, I know that within Bristol especially, activism was something that you encountered quite negatively. I wonder what maybe how you see activism as a construct, if that's not too big a question or complicated.
No, it's a good question. And I do not see activism negatively as a concept. I think that's how change happens. But, and there is a but to that sentence, is the activism to lead to actual change, it has to have a strategy and a thinking behind it. And, as you mentioned your mom, there was campaigning for a thing. Mm-hmm. There is a process and there's know who it is who can influence that. Yeah. And my first experience actually as a politician of feeling very troubled by how activism was mobilised, and particularly against me, was in 2015. When the Syrian people a large chunk of Syrian people had been gassed horribly by their own leader, and their own leader had been throwing people, Assad had been throwing people into prison and torturing them, and there was a systematic, militaristic and brutal regime, and had been for a long time. And there was a really complicated stage where, as a parliament, we were being asked to vote on whether or not we should take action. And there's a very strong argument for, if you follow things through, if we had penalised Assad at that stage, or frankly in 2014 or even 2011,
that an awful lot of things would have been different, including the refugee crisis, which then happened because people fled. We did not act. America did not act. Obama had said that chemical weapons were a red line. They obviously weren't. It gave Assad and his Russian backer, Putin, the feeling of license, which has had other consequences. But the activism that was unleashed against a lot of us, and I have to say especially me, partly because I had a very activist-natured seat, it's one of 4 Bristol seats, was I was sent pictures of dead babies told don't bomb Syria, which showed me that there was a fundamental misunderstanding of what was actually happening in Syria, because the person who was killing children, women and adults was in fact Assad and his henchmen. And what I wanted to do was for Parliament to take action alongside its allies to deal with that. Now that makes life complicated. The people who sent me pictures of dead babies, and I do mean literally, don't bomb Syria, were also asking me as a parliamentarian to institute what's called a no-fly zone over Syria. Now, you don't get to have a no-fly zone without weapons. It doesn't exist. If you have someone who's using barrel bombs against their own people, who has Russian backing to use bombs that come out of aeroplanes, it's more complicated than just saying we shouldn't get involved. And saying we shouldn't get involved in 2015 has had 10 further years of consequences, not just for the Syrian people, but also for refugees, millions of refugees, and then for the developing attitude that's hardened against refugees in those 10 years. So I think that's why I bring that example up, because it's an example of how politics and global politics and activist politics can come into conflict with no apparent way of listening to each other. There didn't seem to be a way that I could see of being able to talk to, and it was thousands of people sending me the same picture of dead babies, and me wanting to say to them, do you understand who is actually already killing the babies? And there didn't seem to be a political space for that. And that continued, that lack of political space.
And tell us then about, I know your mental health must have been really awfully impacted as well by what you saw in 2024 when campaigning for that election. Tell us that process and I guess where it's left you now with how you relate to the issues in Palestine and that whole situation.
Over the last few years, the war in the Middle East isn't the only war that's been happening. And one of the experiences I had is being actually protected by Muslim constituents of mine who were very upset with some people who were protesting against me. They were screaming at me inside a cathedral. And they said, we're Sudanese. And she stood up for us on Sudan. Are you standing up for us on Sudan? And do you think shouting at her and calling her rude words, which I won't repeat, is going to help the Palestinians? Which, of course, it didn't. And there were all sorts of things happened. And some of them were not very pleasant, but none of them were as unpleasant as being bombed, or for that matter, being at a music festival and having people break in and rape, torture and kill. So none of those things are pleasant. And being shouted at and screamed at and having blood daubed on my picture and all sorts of things, it's nothing compared to that. But none of it helped the Palestinians, or for that matter, release the hostages. And I had Jewish constituents as well who had relatives who'd been taken hostage, and I was there to represent them as well. And it became a very complicated issue where actually the Muslims in my constituents, and there were a lot, mostly were supporting me against other people who, I speak Arabic. I have Palestinian friends. I've been part of the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign. None of that registered. And the thing that very much upset me was that the same protesters said they weren't really interested in Sudan. They weren't really interested in Yemen. They weren't really interested in that much in Ukraine. In fact, some of them said it's all been made up. The Russians, you've got it wrong. You don't understand. Russia's actually on the right side. So what was troubling about that was no sense that screaming at me and painting red paint on my face and saying I had my hands covered in blood, none of it was going to help Palestinians. And none of it was actually pointing the responsibility at who was responsible, which was Hamas for invading. And Netanyahu for the way that he has continued to react. None of it solved anything. And I think that's what upset me most, was this is not helping.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean by thinking through a way, which I don't think we've yet found, of being able to work with politics and activism to a constructive humanitarian end. And the person who I lost my seat to said that a lot of the campaigners said that I'd voted against a ceasefire in Palestine, which was just not true. It was just a lie. And that was really difficult, because actually one of the things I notice is if people have heard a thing often enough, if someone comes along and says, that's literally not true, I can show you the Hansard record where I have not voted against. One person said to me in the street, when I showed them the iPad with the record of my voting, said, you could have made that up. But also, even if I had, it didn't make any difference. It would not have made any difference. And so I think that's one area where I remain hopeful that we can find better ways not to be, you're either for us or against us, and actually accepting the world as it is, which means it's complicated. There are very, very bad things happening in the Middle East. There are very bad things happening in Yemen. There are appalling things happening in Sudan, in Ukraine. And I think we need a more thoughtful way of being able to listen to each other when we disagree. Because nothing about painting my face covered in blood achieved anything. I mean,
And this is for both of you. If we're drawing it back to music and what role politics plays in and with music, I suppose, what do you see as the responsibility of the music industry? And how do you think working with politics in music can go alongside the industry as it currently is? Do you think it's possible for the music industry to be political and survive? I know that you spoke about it being actually maybe one of the only ways that we sort of continue to survive as an industry, but how do you see the role of the industry in politics?
I mean, the music industry is political. But I think I'm not just talking about whether or not you're protesting against a particular war. I'm talking about the way that the music industry is engaging with, and musicians are engaging with, AI and copyright as an existential threat to the creative arts. I'm talking about the way that they're engaging with the law on intellectual property. I'm talking about the way that arts and music and the creative sector are seen as an ecosystem in which the commercial sector actually doesn't exist without the publicly invested sector, and understanding that's a political construct. And I think people are, the music industry and other parts of the arts and culture are engaging already. I think that's important, and I think everybody should and can. Typically, it helps to have a body, an industry body. For most industries have one, and so does music. I mean, it may not be what you want it to be, in which case I think that we need to talk about others. But they do exist. They do engage with politicians. They do have campaigns. UK Music, the BPI, they're not necessarily on the side of musicians, but they are on the side of music. A lot of the creative industries musicians union, which has been campaigning and continues to campaign on AI, on copyright, on decent working conditions, on decent pay, on conditions for freelancers, on touring in the European Union. There's any number of things that already are political and already musicians in the music industry are engaging with.
I was just going to bring up one of the things that really moved me on with my understanding of things that were happening in particular between Israel and Palestine was Daniel Barenboim's Wreath lectures for the BBC. I don't know if you've ever listened to them, but they were really just a wonderful showcase for how the way that music is, in particular Western classical music, the dissonance and the friction within music itself is a good kind of reference point for how to, discourse with people about political things, and how there has to be different opinions expressed and listened to and responded to, and that you can't really have beauty and consonants without a certain amount of dissonance. And his metaphors for music and life throughout the whole of the series were just so inspirational that I go back to it again and again. In fact, I've downloaded them to make sure that if they ever get taken off, then I'm not going to be without them. And they really helped me to understand, I suppose, how I felt about my life being as a musician and speaking out for things that I either agreed with or disagreed with. And it gave me the confidence to know that you can't please people. As Thangam said, you can't, even if you've done all the right things, even if you've done things that politically align with a certain group of people, they might not even be ready to listen and respect that. And they'll still doubt you. And of course now we've had years of Trump and his fake news, and music always remains true news. So we've got that, haven't we? We can always fall back on music. And I was listening to Thangam's your essay that you wrote about your relationship with the Beethoven string quartets. But anything like that is so life affirming, to hear people talking about the arts, and it just grounds you again. And I think it reminds you just to listen to people's opinions and allow that dissonance to exist within that space. And kind of respond to that and see if you can find a way through it, like exactly what you were saying, really.
Eleanor, I know in June, I didn't know this until yesterday, and Rebecca told me that in June you wrote an open letter, is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Let's talk about the open letter, because you wrote to Salvi Harps and Lion and Healy about the Israel harp competition.
Yeah.
Tell us about why you did that.
I did that because Salvi Harps is like my harp company. I was so lucky when, at the age of 5, when my mum took a trip on her own into London to try to find me a harp, very randomly, but it's another story. Told you, she's a very powerful woman. And so she found the Salvi Harp shop. And so my relationship with Salvi Harp started as a very young child. And they gave me all of my first big opportunities, and they've supported me throughout what was, before COVID, quite a busy international career, supporting me with harps in different places. And, I thought we had a really wonderful relationship. But when I wanted to talk to them about their support of the Israel harp contest continuing despite what was happening at that time, they tried, first of all, to turn a blind eye and just sort of say, well, we don't really do politics. We just support artists. And actually, I realised that no consideration had been given to all the harpists who'd spent already 2 years preparing an incredibly intense programme of music. And most of those are very young adults who are still, neurologically developing. They're unlikely to have time to be, reading newspapers every day and understanding the full implications of what it might be to go to Israel to participate in an international harp competition. Not to mention, there are other things, honestly, that I could say about that particular contest, but I don't even need to, because it's really about my relationship with Salvi Harps. That's what made me feel entitled to raise it with them directly. And lots of people were in agreement with that, and for many different reasons. Some maybe just feeling like it was just a really disrespectful thing to carry on doing an international harp competition under those situations, but also the people who were concerned about the young harpists and being like young musicians being used unknowingly, unwittingly as political bait, and really that contest is for the glory of Israel. It was conceived as for the glory of Israel, and so that's how it carried on. So they just ignored it all the way through, actually. I never got a response. Yeah, I never got a response. Mm-hmm.
This is something that I feel sort of emboldened by Thangam, you talking about sort of unions and organisations, but I also wonder, as sort of individual musicians, I think sometimes we can feel a bit disempowered in our individual beliefs. And I know that the whole point of political action is to find communities and to sort of work with them, but I often feel that I don't have actually any power. And it's amazing that you wrote that letter, given actually your relationship with them and how, it's always a risk. to take these actions so publicly. But I wonder if either of you had any advice for sort of maybe young musicians at the beginning of their career feeling that they want to be outspoken and they want to campaign for change, or even if you're as a freelancer in an orchestra and you feel uncomfortable about a situation, maybe politically, how do you go about being honest and open about your beliefs whilst also protecting yourself, I suppose?
Ooh. Can you give me a for instance?
For instance,
I can think of one. Can I?
Yeah,
can I
sure.
jump in? So there's this wonderful female. I think it's called the Her Ensemble.
Yeah.
And I think that I remember seeing lots of social media posts about the attire for females in particular, for concert attire, and just pointing out how, you know, grotesquely out of date it is, and how there's never any flexibility, or you're encouraged to wear the high heels, you maybe there's basically a certain look that you'd be encouraged, and it goes of course with the gender binary. You know, you're encouraged to look more female according to their expectations of what looking female is. It's also probably like slightly imbued with sort of like racism, because some of the things that they're asking for maybe would maybe suit, for example, a typical white woman's frame more than perhaps some other nationalities perhaps. As I was reading it, I was really thinking, yeah, it's not my world because I don't do orchestral playing, but I just really felt like, yeah, this is really fascinating to me, because it's not my world, but they're feeling like they're emboldened enough to speak up about it, and lots of us were really excited by that and really happy to jump on the bandwagon and agree. But yeah, there would be, I'm sure, people who wouldn't want to be putting any risk, to their livelihood, and that's completely fair enough as well. And I think when my first child was very young, I'd have felt that was my position at that time. I wouldn't have wanted to rock the boat. I couldn't afford to lose any work at all, so I probably would have just kept stum, as they say. I think some people think that, well, actually, when I was telling people that I was doing this podcast, somebody actually said to me, "Oh, politics, that's a minefield, isn't it?" I said, no, I don't understand. Why is that a minefield? Because surely if you've got things that you're passionate about in your life, things that, they relate to your family and your personal circumstances, that's why you're interested in politics in the first place, because everything is so personal to us. It could be things like I was just reading, Angelina Jolie has helped with a lot with domestic violence against women. She helped an act to be passed. So, she uses her voice to make big changes politically. It's simply about finding things that you feel passionately about and align with and speaking up about them, whether it's as simple as black concert wear and what kind of thing people are being encouraged to wear, or something bigger. So it could be like a very small thing. Yeah, sorry, I rambled a lot there.
Thank you.
So I think if you want to be in any walk of life political, there's a couple of questions to ask yourself. And in music, that's why I wondered if there were some examples. The first one to ask yourself is, what is it you're trying to achieve? Mm-hmm. And there are lots of different things you might want to do that might make you feel better. Having your say doesn't always achieve change. Organising with other people, finding out if it's just you, or is it actually something that everyone feels strongly about, or several people feel strongly about? Is there something beyond that? Is there always, as well, considering that you may be mistaken, there may be other points of view? And I think if you find that you're the only person that thinks that, doesn't mean you're wrong, but it might mean that your ability to change it is affected by the fact it's just you, and you're going to need to think of a different way of doing something. I would always say, if you haven't got a campaign, it's a lot harder, it's a lot lonelier, and it's a lot less likely to succeed. I think there's also a matter of choosing your battles, because there's lots of things in the world. If you want to make a list right now of all things in the world that you think are terrible, it's a very long list.
Yeah.
And you probably aren't thinking about most of them all the time, otherwise you wouldn't get up in the morning. So there has to be a process of thinking, is this my battle? Or is it something I think is wrong somewhere, and me saying this is wrong is unlikely to achieve anything for the person that's actually affected or the people that are actually affected? And if it's something where you think actually our collective voice could change something, think about how you do that, where you use it, does matter. Mm-hmm. And I think I may, we might disagree about that. And that's also fine, because I think we don't all agree on tactics. But I think if you're trying to do is influence a decision made by a decision maker, you actually do have to think about what's most likely for them to change their mind, not how do I want to express what I think. Mm-hmm. If you actually want to change something. Now, that doesn't mean you automatically have to just reverse ferret into whatever mindset the other side or the other people or the organisation or the orchestra, the people who are deciding on what you wear. Doesn't mean you have to turn into their mindset, but it does mean you have to think about it and decide whether or not there is a way that you can persuade them on their own terms. In my view, if you tell me one of your most deeply held beliefs, Becca, and I just say you're wrong, you're not going to change. Mm. And if I then get upset and say you've really hurt me because you're wrong, you're still not going to change. In fact, you're less likely to listen to me. Mm. So I think if you actually want to achieve a change, rather than just say this thing is bad and I don't like it, which is perfectly valid, by the way. If that's what all you want to do is just feel that you've got that off your chest, that's fine. If you actually want to change the situation, you have to be prepared to find out if other people agree. If there is a mindset you can walk into where you're thinking about what are the powerful forces behind this, are there other people we could involve in it? So, yeah.
Yeah, so true.
Thank you so much for that. I sort of have one final question before the questions.
You all got questions?
You hope so. Some. And I know this actually is, it's a bit like dropping the big bomb at the end of your therapy session. You haven't got enough time to cover it, but
it's called door knobbing.
Door knobbing, is that what it's called in therapy? So art sponsorship, Thangam. You were very involved in Sadler's Wells.
Yep.
And I know they've had a recent kerfuffle around Barclays.
Yep. Our biggest sponsor pays for our youth tickets.
As well, there have been discussions about past at the Opera House with BP, those partnerships at the National Theatre also with BP, I'm pretty sure, who now have decided not to be with those or not to take funding from those organisations due to pressure from artists a lot of the time and groups. I just want to know a bit more from the other side of running or helping to run arts organisations. Tell us about the complexities of art sponsorship.
Well, first of all, I'm going to reject your premise of the other side.
Okay.
So we could disagree about that.
Lovely.
But second of all, I think what is it, again, I come back to what I was saying before, what is it you're trying to achieve? If you're trying to persuade oil companies to decarbonise, getting them to stop sponsoring an art exhibition or pay £50 million to the British Museum or sponsoring a theatre company, the most that's likely to achieve is fewer people can go to the theatre, see the exhibition, and the British Museum falls down. It's not going to change the oil company's behaviour. If you want to change an oil company's behaviour, if you want to change a bank's behaviour, there's also a matter of thinking about what is actually going on. So Barclays, we've at Sadler's, and Barclays sponsor the £15 tickets for the Donmar Warehouse. They sponsor any number of art things. They put a lot of money into musicians and artists' pockets during COVID. They kept theatres paying, not all, but a lot of theatres, orchestras, ballet companies. They kept paying wages when the company didn't have to, and there wasn't the money because it wasn't claimable from the government because the schemes didn't cover it. So I would ask myself first, what is it I want Barclays not to do? And what we get when we have people demonstrating outside us is the accusation that Barclays is funding Israel, which is just not true. Barclays is a commercial bank. It has clients. Israel is not one of its clients. But some of its commercial clients, it has a responsibility to trade on their behalf and sell shares and pass them back on, sell them back on, buy and sell shares for them on their behalf as a commercial bank, like every commercial bank, on behalf of clients, some of whom may be investing, and a couple of them are, in arms companies, which are not illegal, by the way.
Yeah, it's just what people disagree with. I mean,
yes, I get that.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure what's achieved by shouting at our audiences outside Sadler's Wells or withdrawing a play. Now, you may disagree. That's my point of view. But I think also at the moment, if you look around, the state isn't coming over the hill. Where's the money going to come from? If we don't have corporate sponsorships, where's the money going to come from?
But the money could come from somewhere else if it doesn't come from Barclays.
Because the demonstrations about Barclays, first of all, I don't see that there's a reason for Barclays to withdraw. But second of all, when there are demonstrations against any one corporate sponsor, all corporate sponsorship goes down. All of it. I work with a lot of businesses, and a lot of them have said, actually, since the Bailey Gifford debacle, which is the most ethical investment fund we have. Look, if any of you have an ethical pension, look at your pension statement. I bet you it's investing in Bailey Gifford. I do. I check. Right? It has the most ethical investment criteria of any investment vehicle. And yet, as a result of the threatened boycott of the Hay Festival, Hay Festival's fine, by the way, but Bailey Gifford withdrew from all sponsorship of literary festivals, others of which will fold eventually or have struggled. And it put off, more importantly, other corporate sponsors. It's not you turn down Bailey Gifford and then someone else comes along. No, actually, for every one Bailey Gifford that withdrew, there were lots and lots of other companies who've all said, why bother? Barclays, they sponsor the Premier League. Guess how many people demonstrate against them sponsoring the Premier League? Have any of you demonstrated against them sponsoring the Premier League? No. So Barclays at the moment is gaining nothing from sponsoring the arts. It's continuing to do so. But there is very strong pressure within Barclays to pull out of arts and just stick to football. And then what will we have gained? We won't have changed any of the banking practices because they're entirely legal. They're on behalf of clients and it's not Barclays.
Can I do a sort of side step? This is not to do with Barclays or even exactly the same issue, but recently I was on an online music session, and there was an audience and there was a host and there was a speaker, and I'd asked a couple of questions to the speaker or the presenter, the harpist who was presenting, about a couple of just sort of slightly frictious issues. There was a harpist from the Romantic period that I wanted his opinion on, and there was also just some things about what it kind of turned into was us sort of discussing things like cancelling people. And I know that came up when you were doing Rebecca, when you did your little sort of advert for this podcast about people being cancelled. And I think, Thangam, what I'm sensing from you is, just kind of whoa there, don't be in such a hurry to cancel people, because there's, first of all, you might not have all your facts straight. Secondly, there might be two sides to the coin, both of which can be very valid,
or three or four.
But what was extraordinary was that when this musician spoke up, he sort of said, we can't go around cancelling everyone, can we? Because there'd be no J.K. Rowling and everything. And I was kind of like, well, actually, I'm fine with that. And there'd be no, if you went to a museum and a library, if we took all the art and all the writings out that had been by middle class white men who were rapists and misogynists and child abusers, there'd be nothing left. I'm I'm making it slightly more extreme than it was, but he was basically saying that. And it's not true, because if you, in inverted commas, do cancel things that you disagree with, whether it's on a big scale or just a personal scale, for example, I won't be playing the music by that racist harp composer, Marcel Tournier.
Oh no!
Yeah, sorry, Becca. I know, another one bites the dust. So I won't be playing that music, but I don't need to tell my students not to play it. I need to educate them and tell them, I'm really sorry to say this, but unfortunately this composer had racist ideologies. You can make up your own mind as to whether you want to still play music by that composer. But I think that if there weren't pieces and writings by a lot of these people in museums and libraries, they would be filled with Indigenous artwork and much more interesting, much more varied, writings and poetry and compositions by females, non-binary people who may have actually survived throughout the course of history if their work had been appreciated and they weren't marginalised. And so I completely disagree with that. And I think that although you can't envisage that other people and other companies will step forward and fill that role by a company, and I don't know enough about Barclays, so I can't possibly say Barclays, but just because you can't envisage a way that could be supported to that financial degree, it doesn't mean it's not possible. And it just might mean that the right people haven't been asked yet. That's just my opinion.
Well, but what would have been achieved? What would have been achieved?
By cancelling Barclays.
Yeah. Who would have gained? Not a single Palestinian.
We've got about 5 minutes.
Oh, yes, we've got questions. Quick
questions. Because Thangam does need to leave at 7:30. So please ask quick questions. Ash, why don't you start us off?
Okay, well, I've got lots and lots of questions, but I'm going to be an annoying person who asks 2 questions at once.
They have to be really quick,
very quick, okay. So one of the things is, we haven't talked about, you did allude to the European Union, but we haven't talked about Brexit. Yeah. I'm doing a survey of opera singers at the moment and what has really prevented their careers from developing and the challenges that they're facing. One of the things they're saying is that Brexit completely cut off their legs. They were running in their careers and it stopped them. Politically, there's been no advocacy for them. The Labour Party has given up on Brexit. The idea that, you've got a number of days that you can work in Europe, which doesn't suit musicians because musicians have to have work. Yeah. All over the world. If you are putting up barriers, this is a clear interaction between music and politics, which is what we're here to talk about.
So if I could answer that, first of all, it was the previous government that negotiated the trade deal that actually didn't deal with that. I had campaigned on it, as had the Musicians' Union. It was Labour Party policy as we went into the general election that we would renegotiate that deal and that the deal on musicians touring would be part of that. At the moment, it's at stalemate. And that's not because the Labour Party hasn't tried. You may not know about that, but I'm telling you.
Why is it at stalemate?
Well, it's both sides, and the Europeans have not yet agreed. And we may have a long way to go yet. But we've shifted the relationship with Europe significantly.
How can musicians actually help that process?
Keep campaigning.
But have we actually got a voice?
Yes.
Have we got status enough to do it?
Yes, you very much have. I mean, that's why we put it in the manifesto.
Brilliant question. One more, the man at the back.
Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you very much. Thank you, panel. Keith Ames, former MU official of 25 years, as Thangam knows. Firstly, I would just like to say, and very nice to meet you, Eleanor. Firstly, I think your loss in 2024 has been a loss for not just Bristol, but for the Labour movement and for the cultural world in this country, and I think that needs to be hugely recognised. My question is about the Department for Culture, Media and Sport. I think there are 24 ministerial departments, I believe. And when there's a queue for money, there always seem to be 24th, as you alluded to earlier. I've never liked the fact, and I believe we've had this discussion in the past, about culture being aligned with sport. And why isn't there just a Department for Culture on its own, because I think this country deserves it? And do you think that there's a possibility of that sometime in our lifetimes?
I don't think there is a possibility of there being just culture on its own. No. And I think if there was, it would be a tiny department, so it would have even lower status, not greater status, unfortunately.
Yes, this lady just on the end here. This will probably be the last question, I think.
Just taking it back to musicians, which is what Royal Society Musicians is about. You can have a lot of musicians who have very strong political views who will campaign as individuals. I have a friend, Carenza Peacock, who is involved all the time, and she was supposed to be here, but anyway. But how do you feel about those musicians who use somebody else's brand and platform, like a conductor at the Proms or the dancer at the Royal Opera House who unfurled a Palestinian flag? So how do you feel about people who use somebody else's platform and the conflict there?
I think it's unprofessional.
Eleanor?
I'm all for it, unsurprisingly.
Becca? I love it. I think as individual musicians, we don't often have platforms enough to use it. And of course, it can be seen as an abuse of those platforms. But at the same time, when we are sort of so isolated and disempowered in our beliefs, of course, we can join together to campaign. I think that we should be using opportunities when we can.
There is one more.
Okay, one last.
Do we have time?
No.
Yes, we did.
Okay, we have
Okay.
time.
Yeah, it's nearly half past. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Thangam, you said music and culture is not in a good place. I think I heard you saying that earlier. And I'm just thinking now, this is a big subject, but I'm thinking now of ENO, WNO. In fact, your old school, the Music and Dance Scheme, how safe is it? Nottingham University, Cardiff University, the list goes on. But the big subject is also what's going on in schools. It's a really serious situation. Are we in the situation where we're having to accept that we're fighting a losing battle against so many other interests?
No.
Or should we be fighting harder?
No, because we have campaigned, and I say we, including everyone in this room, for a return to making music and the arts part of the core curriculum. And last week that was announced. That's a successful campaign. That's a win. There's still more work to do. I think that when we hear about decisions like ENO and WNO, I think there's lots of ways at looking at all of those. But one of the reasons UK Opera Association was formed is because each individual opera company was operating on its own and campaigned on its own. That doesn't work. You have to, as other industries do, fight as a body, campaign with the unions, and make a voice that's collective across the sector, across music, across opera, across theatre and music and opera and dance would be my fantasy.
But is music becoming more middle class now?
Well, after 14 years of it being completely removed, more or less, from the education system, yes. And the current government is trying its best to reverse that.
Good.
But that's because of campaigning. I mean, this is what I want to just sort of like a little reality check here. Guys, we campaigned. We got to change. That's a good thing. It's not gone far enough for me, but then it's a change, and that really matters.
Yeah.
It appreciates success. That was announced 2 weeks ago, actually, and I think it's important that we say that's a good thing.
Well done. Yeah.
Well done us.
Yeah.
Well done you.
And just the really, really last question was one at the back, right? Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
I just wanted to ask, how can we help politicians feel less embarrassed about going to classical music events? Because I've known that they've actually had to go in secretly through, security entrances.
Is that true, though?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you name one?
Because I work in PR and I used to work for venues, and it was always the thing that, oh gosh, you just have to make sure they don't get photographed there, And there was that whole scandal of George Osborne, turning up to the Opera House. And I just always feel like...
Did it?
But maybe I'm wrong.
Didn't hurt his career. I mean, how can you persuade them? First off, I think that's the wrong thing to try and do. Musicians and actors and dancers, what we need our politicians to understand is how many jobs depend on all of those industries. What goes into them. If they enjoy going to a classical music concert, bonus. If they don't, I don't care. I just want them to understand how many jobs depend on music and how great a skill music is for children to be learning, so that they've got the choice. Most politicians don't understand how the body of a fish, but politicians who have fishing in their constituency do understand the importance of fishing as an industry. So I would say, if they want to come, it's part of my job is to try and get them to come to opera, but to be honest, I'm not going to try. I'm likely to I'm not, because I don't care if they like opera. I do, but I want them to come backstage and see how many jobs are involved in, the electricians, the scene painters, the carpenters. And if I manage to trick them into hearing a rehearsal and they say, God, that was lovely, I think I recognise that. And I say, yeah, you heard it at a football match, because at football matches they sing opera arias. I don't need them to love opera any more than anyone who worked in the travel industry needed me to like travel agents when I represented them. Didn't need to. I just needed to know how many jobs, what the training was, what opportunities it offered children, how to make it more equal, fair, have decent employment practices. So I would say don't set yourself an impossible task. And by the way, if you tell me who they were, because I don't think it did George Osborne's career any harm. And if there's anyone else who went in secretly, fine.
No, it was all Tony Blair's era, very much. It was that, I remember.
And yet under that era, we got free museums and galleries. We got massive investments in arts and music teaching. So I would ask, did it matter? Did it matter? And I'm here as the Chief Executive of the UK Opera Association. I'm genuinely saying to you, I don't care if they go in the back entrance or the front entrance, as long as they fight for music education in schools.
I think it does matter, because if you see Keir Starmer playing football There's advocacy there. There's somebody who's actually enjoying a thing that should be part of society. If you're getting politicians who like opera, who love it, who are furtively kind of sneaking into the opera house around the back in their Macs because they don't want to be seen to be, because it's seen as elitist, or because it doesn't have the status that they think has political currency, then something is wrong.
Yes, it is. I agree. And I think part of that is down to us in the performing arts to help politicians, but not just politicians, more the public. The public thinks that we're elitist. It's not just politicians, right? Politicians are there to represent their constituents. And if you poll, where I live in Newport, if you poll most of the people in my street, in my neighbourhood, in the entire constituency, do you think opera is for you or not? They're going to say no.
It's very interesting thing you say, that politicians are there to represent their constituencies, because surely they're also there to change hearts and minds.
Yes,
and to provide leadership. To provide leadership.
Yeah, on a
and
range of things.
Isn't leadership going to do what you love doing and saying this is worthwhile, and therefore we're going to show you that why it's worthwhile.
But most politicians, I'm just going to hypothesize, if they don't love opera, it's not the end of the world. We can still get them to love what opera does. If they don't, and you do have some politicians who champion opera. I can name them. There's quite a lot of us actually, but to me, that hasn't achieved anything. What's more likely to achieve something is making the economic argument, the joy argument, the creativity
argument. It would be very
argument.
Nice to have a list of people who love opera, and if they want to be on the list.
And what good would it do? I'm right here.
Because that would just declare that there are 50 politicians who love opera, and that would be a great, and they could all write for a piece for Opera Now saying why they love opera, and that would be a great thing to do, because that would be a great piece of political advocacy where music and politics actually meet.
Wow. And with that, I look forward to seeing the list, and I look forward to publishing it on our Instagram page. Thank you so much to both of you for such a relevant conversation, and for really your honest thoughts, because we love to disagree on this podcast, and it's so important. Thank you to RSM, Charlotte and Mark in particular, for hosting us, and we'll be back in a few months' time for another one.
It's going to be AI.
Oh, yeah, it's AI. Yeah, great.
AI on the concert platform. So join us for that one.
So a round of applause for our guests, please.
Thank you.